Thank you for joining us for another edition of Tuesdays with Trey. We're delighted to have with us today the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee from the great state of South Carolina, Lindsey Graham. Welcome, Chairman Graham.
Well, thank you, Trey. I appreciate it very much. I hear you're doing well. I'll try not to stop your momentum today.
You recently announced your intention to call former special counsel Mueller before your committee. What are some areas you would like to explore with him?
Does he realize how off the rails the investigation got? From the first time he testified to now, a lot has changed. The Horowitz report has come out. Bottom line is, I had no intention of calling Mr. Mueller. He testified before the House. It was not pretty to watch. But at the end of the day, Trey, he decided to interject himself into the Roger Stone case. I don't blame the president at all for commuting the sentence of Roger Stone, given the circumstances of that case. So if Mr. Mueller wants to comment on that aspect of the investigation, I want him to comment about the Carter Page warrant application. I want him to comment on basically what did he have to suggest there was collusion between campaign operatives and the Russian government on August 17th, 2017, and start from there. He has a lot to account for, and we'll see how he does.
Well, Senator, the last time he was on Capitol Hill, it was painful to watch and to listen to. But I guess your point is if he has time to write an op-ed, then he has time to answer the United States Senate's questions.
Well, you know, the Mueller investigation was one of the most high-profile events in American history, to be honest with you. They were investigating the Trump campaign of 2016 and apparently beyond for colluding with a foreign government. People were indicted. Nobody's been indicted or going to jail for working with the Russians. Well, what do we know now, Trey? Because of the work you did and your colleagues in the House, we know that the Crossfire Hurricane was probably one of the most corrupt investigations since J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI. The Horowitz report, the IG for the Department of Justice, exposed all kind of troubling problems. The FISA court rebuked the Department of Justice and the FBI. It was the Horowitz investigation that found that the Russian subsource, the primary provider of information to Mr. Steele for the dossier, had told the FBI in January of 2017 it was basically hearsay and not reliable. They continued to use it to get a warrant in April and June of 2017. And what I want to know from Mr. Mueller is, what evidence did you have that Carter Page was a Russian agent colluding with the Russian government as part of the campaign of Donald Trump? Papadopoulos, just go down the list. January the 4th, 2017, the FBI agent in charge of Crossfire Hurricane Flynn component recommended that General Flynn be dropped from the investigation. That's the professional side of the House saying we can't find anything to suggest that Flynn is a Russian agent. January the 5th is when you have the now famous meeting with Obama, Comey, Yates, and others. But I would like to know from Mueller, what did you believe Flynn was doing with the Russians? And did you even know that the FBI recommended the case be dropped in January of 2017?
Well, I know that you were at church on Sunday morning, so you probably missed Adam Schiff on CNN. He had a lot to say about the senior senator from South Carolina, but I don't recall him being asked much why he has yet to call Michael Horowitz before the House Intelligence Committee. You had a hearing with Michael Horowitz. It's one of the few congressional hearings I've ever seen where the reality actually exceeded people's expectations. Why did you think it was important to have Horowitz? What's the state of FISA? And why are we having a hard time getting the House Democrats to call and hear from him?
Well, that's a good question, Trey. So there are a lot of mysteries in the world. Adam Schiff is not one of them. He's pretty easy to understand. You know him pretty well. Anytime he can create a narrative harmful to Trump, he will. If he has to doctor a statement from a transcript, a phone call with the Ukraine, to make it sound worse than it is, he does. When it comes to leaking deposition testimony to create a narrative about collusion where there is none, he did. He's never lifted a finger to look at how Crossfire Hurricane became so corrupt. He's never had Horowitz come before the House to talk about his findings. He's never asked any questions about why the FISA court rebuked the Department of Justice and the FBI. He's shown no interest in trying to deal with a system out of control. It's all about getting Trump. He's a partisan hack, and I'm not shocked that he doesn't want to look at both sides of the story. Here's what I can say. Democrats approached me a couple of years ago to make sure that Mueller couldn't be fired except for cause. I thought it was important that Mr. Mueller be allowed to conduct his investigation without political influence, because I didn't know if there was any there, but I believed it was important for somebody to look, given all the accusations being levied and made. I was a great, wonderful person when I said, let Mueller do his job. You can't fire him except for cause. Now that I want to find out, based on the Horowitz report, how corrupt Crossfire Hurricane and how sloppy the Mueller investigation was, all of a sudden I'm the enemy of the people. I can say this, Trey. I made sure that Trump's campaign was looked at simply because I thought our country needed somebody to look at it. I'm hell-bent on making sure that somebody investigates the investigators. And if you're waiting on a Democrat to do what I did for Mueller, you're going to die waiting. All they want is an outcome. They don't care what they have to do to get it. As long as you're after Trump, no harm, no foul. The time has come for us to look at the other side of the story. Stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of stuff come out. Here's the question.
You put your finger on something. Then I want to ask you about the defund the police movement. But you put your finger on something. When I hear the phrase Russia investigation, I kind of divide it into three parts. Number one, there is Russia and what they've done to this country, continue to do to this country. And I realize there's some folks on television, some of them are on Fox in the evenings, who don't necessarily agree that Russia is a threat or an enemy to this country. I assume you do believe that. Do you believe that Russia is capable of sowing the seeds of discord and would like to see this country divided against itself?
Not only is it capable, it's part of basically a geopolitical strategy. It's to try to break up the European Union. It's to try to weaken NATO. It's to try to weaken the democratic systems all over the world. They do cyber attacks against the Ukraine and other democracies surrounding Russia. But it was the Russians who stole the Hillary Clinton emails. It was the Russians who hacked into the DNC system. And they were trying to create discord. It was the Russians, in my view, that provided all the garbage for the Christopher Steele dossier. The Russian subsource, he wasn't subsource, he was an employee of Christopher Steele. Imagine if the Republican Party had hired Christopher Steele to dig up dirt on Hillary Clinton, and Christopher Steele hired somebody, a Russian, to get a bunch of dirt coming out of Russia. It was used to get a warrant against a Clinton staffer, and the whole episode was garbage. It'd be front page news all over the world. So, yes, Russia's a bad actor, but let me tell you what I believe. I believe that the dossier, which was the key component of getting the warrant against Carter Page, was in fact Russian disinformation. I believe that the FBI was on notice that it was unreliable, continued to use it anyway.
For the full podcast, go to foxnewspodcast.com.